Poco X4 Pro 5G review, a familiar, high-quality mid-ranger. After the Poco M4 Pro 5G laid on a confidently competent budget phone experience at the beginning of the year, it's the turn of the Poco X4 Pro 5G to step things up a notch. It costs a little more, but that means a corresponding increase in quality virtually across the board. With the Poco X4 Pro 5G's very close cousin, the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G, already making quite an impression at this end of the market, we're eager to see what Xiaomi's other budget brand can do. In the Poco X4 Pro 5G, Xiaomi has essentially released the same phone twice. Its core components and software are identical to the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G's, and its design is pretty similar, too. We rated that phone pretty highly in our 5-star review, so there's surely plenty to like here. Once again, you're getting an excellent 120Hz OLED display, a competent Snapdragon 695 processor, and an eye-catching 108 megapixels main camera. You can also count on the bundled 67W charger to get the phone's large 5000 mAh cell up to full capacity in a quoted 41 minutes. While the specs are remarkably similar to the latter, the OnePlus Nord CE2 5G offers half the internal storage, a less fluid 90Hz display, and a smaller 4500 mAh battery for the same money. But as you'll soon find out below, the OnePlus gives you superior performance and cleaner software. The Poco X4 Pro 5G is chunkier and boxier than the Poco M4 Pro 5G, with flat edges rather than the usual curves. It's one of many shared elements with the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. While the body of the phone is made of matte plastic, the rear is made of glass, resulting in a pleasingly solid feel. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it feels premium, but it certainly feels pretty good. The look of that rear panel bears some resemblance to the Poco M4 Pro, not the 5G model, specifically in the form of its large, width-spanning camera module. It's a little wasteful, as the camera components themselves are all located in the top left corner. However, it's certainly distinctive, and it ensures that the phone sits solidly on any flat surface. Poco has given its phone a flat display, as you'd expect for this sort of money. It's coated in Gorilla Glass 5, and an IP53 rating ensures a certain degree of dust and water resistance. This is quite a big phone at 164x76 by 8.1 mm, HWD, while a weight of 205 grams is up there with smartphone heavyweights such as the Xiaomi 12 Pro and the iPhone 13 Pro. Poco phones have a history of packing in meaty stereo speakers, and the Poco X4 Pro 5G doesn't disappoint, outputting loud, clear sound from the speaker on the bottom edge and another in the earpiece. You get both a 3.5 mm headphone jack and an IR blaster on the top edge, which are both welcome additions. The latter is quite unusual in a phone of any price, though it's another common element with the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. Using Xiaomi's pre-installed Mi Remote app, you can use the phone like a remote control with your TV or Hi-Fi. Indeed, Xiaomi's MIUI 13 is present here on top of Android 11, just as it was with the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. It's just as functional and customizable, but also just as staged up with additional apps and gaudy icons. The Poco X4 Pro 5G's most impressive component is its 6.67 inches AMOLED display, which features a 2400 by 1080 FHD+ resolution, and a flagship smooth 120Hz refresh rate. With auto brightness active, it will get to 700 candelas per square meter in regular conditions and a peak of 1200 candelas per square meter when things get really bright. With auto brightness switched off, I recorded a maximum brightness of 437 candelas per square meter, which is fine for indoor conditions. I recorded an sRGB gamut coverage of 99.3% in the default vivid display mode, though this also yields a pretty inaccurate Delta E reading of 3.65. Switching to the standard color setting led to much more accurate results, with an sRGB gamut coverage of 91.8%, a gamut volume of 92.5% and a Delta E of 1.4, acceptably close to the ideal score of 1. Without wishing to sound like a stuck record, all of this is very similar to the results I obtained from the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G, reflecting the fact that it's exactly the same component running exactly the same Xiaomi display calibration software. That doesn't make it any less impressive for the money, though. The Poco X4 Pro 5G runs on Qualcomm's Snapdragon 695 5G, and is backed by either 6GB or 8GB of RAM, depending on your region. Here in the UK, it's the latter. As hardware setups go, the Poco X4 Pro 5G isn't tearing up any trees, but it's perfectly adequate for the price. It's a modest bump over the Snapdragon 732G of the Poco X3 NFC, if not the blazing fast Snapdragon 860 of the Poco X3 Pro. Xiaomi seems to have throttled back on performance in favor of an AMOLED display and 5G with this year's Pro model, which makes the X4 Pro 5G a slower but better balanced phone. Compared to similarly priced rivals, the Poco X4 Pro 5G is in the middle of the pack. An average Geekbench 5 single-core score of 684 and a multi-core score of 2048 as a match for the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. Unsurprisingly considering the identical specs, and better than the likes of the Nokia X10, but falls quite a bit short of the OnePlus Nord CE2. The Poco X4 Pro 5G features a large 5000 mAh battery that will stand up to a full day of intensive use with ease, and can potentially last you a full 2 days if you keep your usage relatively light. In our standard looping video test, the Poco X4 Pro 5G lasted just under 18 hours. That's around half an hour shy of the Xiaomi Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G, rather oddly, and about 2 hours short of the Nokia X10. It's still a decent result, though, and you really don't have anything to worry about on the stamina front. Xiaomi has brought out the big guns with the Poco X4 Pro 5G's camera, at least with the main sensor. It's led by a large 1/1.52 inches 108 megapixels wide camera, though the system tails off dramatically with a puny 8MP ultrawide and a superfluous 2 megapixels macro sensor. You probably guessed it, but this is an identical camera setup to the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. Just like its close cousin, image quality from that 108 megapixels main sensor is of a decent quality, turning out nicely balanced pixel-binned 12 megapixels images. You can also opt for the full 108 megapixels works if you want. Also like the Redmi, the AI assistant here is left off by default, and I generally preferred it to stay that way. While the AI assistant served to brighten up the scenes on a challengingly overcast day, it also blew out a number of highlights and gave things a slightly false, icy blue tint. The Poco X4 Pro 5G is another very good affordable phone from the Xiaomi sub-brand. It isn't an absolute performance powerhouse, with the OnePlus Nord CE2 providing faster silicon for the same sort of money, but there's a lot to like elsewhere. The Poco X4 Pro 5G has other attributes, not least an excellent 120Hz AMOLED display. Its 108 megapixels main camera is capable of good things too, and the phone is well stacked with internal storage. Battery life is strong, and charging speeds are very impressive courtesy of a 67W wired charger included in the box. If I have one outstanding complaint about the Poco X4 Pro 5G, it's the sense of déjà vu when comparing it to the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. But then that's an excellent phone for the money, which naturally means that the Poco X4 Pro 5G is, too.